There are few words I avoid more than blitzkrieg. Although it sounds great, it is often just used for clickbait and cheap effect, rather than in a reflective way. Of course, there are reputable people that use the term, but usually it is in quotation mark, italics and/or precluded by the words the so-called. For the sake of brevity, I will skip the so-called in this video. So let's start with the origin story. First, the term blitzkrieg means literally translated lightning war. Although it is a German word, the Germans actually rarely used it before the war. According to various sources, the term could only be tracked down a very few times in German pre-war literature. Additionally, it wasn't clearly defined at all. During the war it became used more often, yet the word was still not used in any precise technical sense. But it gets better. Both Hitler and Guderian, the two Germans most closely associated with blitzkrieg in the English-speaking world, appear to have believed it to be of foreign origin. Since Time magazine used the term in September 1939, it is most likely the origin for the English-speaking world. Yet even after the war, Heinz Guderian, the father of the Panzerwaffe, just mentioned the word only once in his memoirs. Nach dem anfänglichen Gelingen rascher Schläge zu Beginn des Zweiten Weltkrieges sprachen unsere Gegner daher von Blitzkriegen. After the initial success of rapid blows at the beginning of the Second World War, our opponents spoke about blitzkrieg. Also, another famous German commander, Erich von Manstein, didn't use it in his memoirs. Thus, unsurprisingly, blitzkrieg was never an official terminology in German doctrine or professional military writings. Or one could say that most German professionals in the military field avoided the term like the plague. So in other words, blitzkrieg was first and foremost a buzzword, even back then. So in a way, when it is used for clickbait nowadays, the content creators actually use it quite correctly. Yet there's another major problem here. Because most people have various associations with the term due to its constant use. And it should be noted that actually historians dropped the ball here quite significantly. Although in recent years this had changed, yet the damage is done, to quote an article from 1995. Yet not only does the notion of a German blitzkrieg concept or doctrine survive in popular consciousness and popular literature, it persists with many professional historians too. This of course in some cases led to full bullshit bingo, with terms like blitzkrieg economics, blitzkrieg Luftwaffe or blitzkrieg strategy. Now before we answer the final question what blitzkrieg actually was, we need to tackle what is commonly associated with it. One of the implicit key assumptions that goes with the term and usage of blitzkrieg is that it was something completely new or at least revolutionary. And many people also state that explicitly that what happened in 1939 to 1941 was a complete new form of warfare. While actually there are scholars which took a closer look at the big picture that have come to a very different conclusion. To the Germans, however, blitzkrieg was never a revolution, but the incremental development of concept and doctrines that originated from the campaigns of Frederick the Great, Blücher, Moltke the Elder, and those of the First World War. Basically, there are several themes that run through Prussian and German military history. First, the focus on short wars won by decisive battles. Second, a strong emphasis on surprise, mobility and operational warfare, or Bewegungskrieg, with a strong emphasis on outflanking the enemy with the entire force. And third, an aggressive stance, thus even during a strategic defense trying to strike the enemy on the operational level. So regarding the general principles, there was no innovation or major change. This probably becomes even more apparent when we consider the following. When the Third Reich went to war, its army's latest general field manual had been published in 1933. It had been written before rearmament had gained momentum and before the 1st Panzer Division was established. In other words, blitzkrieg, or better what is often associated with it, was from the principle as traditional as it gets. It was good old-fashioned Prussian maneuver warfare, just properly merged and organized with new technologies. Among these were most notably the Panzer, the aircraft, and probably most importantly, the radio. Because without proper communication and coordination, maneuver warfare is almost impossible. Well, this brings us to the final point, namely, what is blitzkrieg? Well, I would say there are basically two options, a strict interpretation and a more open one. If we go for the strict and disciplined, blitzkrieg is basically nothing else than a buzzword assessment. On the battlefield and in the campaigns, blitzkrieg was a result or perhaps an ex post facto description of the result. It was never a tactical or an operational system. Now, a more open interpretation would try to reconcile the fact that the word is strongly associated with the Panzerwaffe could be the following. Blitzkrieg was traditional aggressive German-Prussian maneuver warfare, with a focus on achieving a decisive victory on the battlefield, in combination with mechanized units, close air support, and a radio-based command and control system. Or in other words, it was an evolutionary step, not a revolutionary one, although the results might be considered revolutionary, depending on the viewpoint. As always, sources are linked in the description. Special thanks to Justin for fire support on this video. If you want to learn more about German military history, check out this video about the Panzer Grenadier Division. Or if you're more interested in a sober assessment of the current US Navy and Chinese Navy strategies, check out this video. Anyway, thank you for watching and see you next time.